Hello friends, welcome to FDR India. In what may be a historic day for our country, a Women's Reservation Bill is in the works. Let's talk to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan and seek his perspectives on this. Hello sir.
Hello Ankit.
Sir, as we speak, the last night Union Cabinet had approved a Women's Reservation Bill to enhance representation of women in the Parliament and state legislative assemblies. While we do not know the text of the current bill that is going to be presented in the Parliament, in the new Parliament, we already have a bill passed in 2010 in the Rajya Sabha. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think it is the right way forward?
Now, first of all, should women have adequate representation in legislatures? The answer is an emphatic yes. Not only because women constitute 50% of the population, they are underrepresented, because we never in India crossed 15% of the seats for women in Lok Sabha or state assemblies, I think except one of the northeastern states on one occasion. So we absolutely need that. There's no question about it. But apart from the legitimacy of representation, there's another very important reason. In India, typically power is seen as a preserve of the male. Power is about control, not service. Power is not about improving lives, but danda and money. Our expectation and hope, and all over the world that happened, is if women have adequate representation in legislatures, they view power differently. Women typically see power as a service, power as empowerment of our young people, the real issues that matter to the family, education of children and healthcare of the family, and in general, decentralization, not control, but service. And for both these reasons, legitimacy of representation and changing the nature of politics, from this macho, control-driven politics to service-driven, outcome-driven politics, women should have adequate representation. Now, what is the best model? The model proposed earlier, in my judgment, is very flawed. I don't know what is the present model, because until the government introduces the bill in Parliament, we would not know what it contains. But this has been going on for more than 30 years, right from early 90s, Narayan Rao's government, till date, every government or successive government, they have been making efforts. The model that has come before Parliament so far, including the 108th Amendment approved by the Rajya Sabha, which now lapsed that bill because Lok Sabha has not taken it up subsequently. I think in 2010, as you said, it was approved. The basic model is the same model applicable in the local governments,
right,
who are subsequently adopted local governments. What is that? 1/3 of the seats shall be reserved, constituency reserved. And that means in those constituencies, only women can contest. Therefore, a women's election is mandatory. It looks nice, but it's not really a good model for a variety of reasons. The first is, what is happening in local governments, panchayats and municipalities? Now we have half the reservation, earlier 1/3.
Yes.
In most cases, we have proxy candidates. You go to many villages, you see a man dominating, but he's not elected.
Right.
Oftentimes is referred to in various parts of the country as Panchpati.
Right. Yeah.
The husband of the Sarpanch, who is nominally elected and ceremonially put away somewhere, hidden away somewhere, and does not open her mouth in most cases.
Right.
And the same thing will happen here also. The male candidates will make sure that their family members, their daughters and wives and others, members of the family, they will be keeping the seats warm for them. The real power is exercised by the male politicians. Therefore, it becomes symbolic without substance. The second problem is, necessarily, once you have 1/3 of the seats reserved for women, already we have SC/ST reservations, about 24-25% in the country. That means half the seats will be reserved. Therefore, necessarily you have to have rotation of seats. That means in each election cycle, every seat will be rotated. Every incumbent member will be dislocated. She or he will not be able to contest. Now, the women who made a name for themselves, and some of the women in panchayats, municipalities, they're doing a fabulous job. They've established their name. But because of the rotation, next time around, women's seats are given elsewhere, and there is no way after such a large reservation, some more seats will be given for the same woman candidate in a general seat. And therefore, a real competent leaders among women, they will not be able to continue. And in politics, if you don't contest, if you have no right to contest and earn the appreciation and the trust of the people, then you fade away.
Right.
You become inconsequential. So even the successful women leaders who emerged as champions and competent leaders earn the public trust, they will fade away. So the very purpose is defeated. So each time with rotation, politics is thrown into a vortex of confusion. And it almost becomes like a lottery-driven politics. Politics and leadership development are very serious business. There can't be a lottery like, an elephant garlands somebody and that person becomes king overnight. These are all fanciful notions in a democracy. Leadership is serious. It takes a lifetime to build quality leadership. For all these reasons, that's not a very good idea. It actually may do some considerable harm and will not empower women. What is the alternative?
Right.
Happily, 25 years ago, Lok Sabha movement and FDR, along with a few other organizations and individuals, Center for Civil Society, Center for CSDS, I think, Study of Development Societies, then Manushi, Madhu Kishwar, Yogendra Yadav, Dhirubhai Seth. We requested them all to come together. So we prepared a detailed note and came up with an alternative model. Happily, the data shows that women are elected more often than men, provided women candidates are available. What does it mean? In many countries in the world, there's a misogyny. There is a general opposition to women in leadership. Like in a country like America, women are not pressured. Particularly America is a good example. Whereas in India, there is absolutely no prejudice against women leaders. If you take the political parties, recognized political parties, because the contest in India is essentially between the recognized party candidates.
Right.
Independents almost never win. And the rare cases they win, they immediately are with another party, one party or the other, because they were earlier with a party. When they were denied their aspirations or ambitions, they contest as independent for the time being and go back and join a mainstream party. That is a pattern in India. And almost all independents lose their deposits. So the contest is among recognized parties. Among recognized party candidates, women, about 33% are elected among women candidates. Men, only 25-26% of the men are elected. That means our voters actually are preferring women. At the very least, there is no prejudice against women. So the problem, which is essentially that of political parties, they're not putting up an adequate number of candidates, a pool of viable candidates before the people. We are converting that into electorate's problem and reserving constituency with proxy leadership, with rotation, with all the uncertainty, very poor leadership development of men and women, and we are throwing the whole democracy into turmoil. Instead, a simple law, without even a constitutional amendment, by which you mandate that 1/3 of the seats shall be filled by political parties, by women candidates. And two, to make sure that they don't field women in weak seats, let the state be the unit for Lok Sabha. That means within each state, supposing a party contests, let's say, Uttar Pradesh 80 seats, 27 seats shall be for women minimum. In another state, Maharashtra, they contest 48 seats, Lok Sabha, 16 at the least shall be for women. But where they will nominate depends on the quality of candidates available, the nurturing of leadership. It's not reservation of a seat, but it's a mandatory quota within a party. And if they don't nominate adequate women candidates, they lose the symbol. So party will become irrelevant. So it has to be necessarily nominated. Now, for the state assembly, you make, let us say, a combination of 3 Lok Sabha seats into a contiguous block as a unit. Why? Again, so that in weak seats, the party does not nominate women. Take Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. Each Lok Sabha seat has about 7 assembly segments.
Right.
So 3 Lok Sabha seats means 21 assembly constituencies. Out of the 21, any places of your choice, 7 shall be women. That applies to every single group of Lok Sabha constituencies. It's a very simple and elegant model. The other advantage of this model is, this will also automatically facilitate nomination of enough women for the Legislative Council at the state and for the Rajya Sabha. The bills that were introduced in Parliament, they did not look at upper houses, where the easiest thing is to elect enough numbers in upper house, because they are essentially party nominations, indirect election. So that shows that the parties and the governments have not been thinking through it very carefully. It's done in a very perfunctory manner. And most important, leadership development will be nurtured. Leadership development is serious business, and women who emerge as authentic leaders, they can nurture their constituencies and emerge as national leaders and state leaders of significant importance. So it's a win-win model, and I believe it will be useful if the parties look at this rather than go back to the same old model, a bad model of reservation with rotation, because there is no significant democracy in the world where reservation is with rotation is practiced. It's unthinkable. Every seat being rotated every election, like in panchayats, municipalities, there is not a significant leader who emerged from local governments. It's not an accident, partly because local governments are not given adequate powers, partly because there was no leadership development. Even though local governments were weak in many places earlier, there was no constitutional sanction. 28 chief ministers came through local governments and 4 or 5 major cabinet ministers at the union level before 1990s. Much of the period, during emergency, other periods, there were no local governments. Despite that, very major leaders emerged from local governments in those days. Post 1993-94, after 73rd, 74th Amendment, you see almost nobody who is influential in state politics and national politics. Only one chief minister and a couple of leaders of some significance at the state level. None else. Why? There is no leadership development. There is no continuity of leadership. Rotation is killing leadership. So it's not a smart idea to have reservation of seats with rotation. It's a much smarter idea to mandate political parties to nominate necessarily 1/3 of the seats that they contest for women, subject to certain safeguards so that women are not relegated to some weak seats where they will lose.
So what about, so you said that instead of making the seats reserved, you're saying mandating the political parties to field 33% of the seats as women candidates. What if we keep the reservation but do not have rotation of seats?
Can we imagine 50% of seats permanently reserved to certain categories without the rest of the population having a right to contest? Just as we are now complaining that women not being elected in sufficient numbers does not enhance legitimacy of representation. Now, if 50% of the seats, there is no male candidate who can even contest, it's very artificial politics. Extremely artificial politics. And proxy system will continue. The male politicians who are powerful there will in perpetuity make sure that only their families are there. So that's not going to help the country at all. Democracy is about dynamism, leadership. No circulation of elites. Here is a good leader. Another leader challenges from another community, another gender, whatever, and then earns public trust and goodwill, has excellent track record of service, can rise in politics. So 50% of India, you guarantee that the persons cannot rise because of gender or caste. It's not a smart way of running our political system.
Right. So you also said that the topic of women's reservation has been in the public discourse for 3 decades now. Why was it hard to drive a consensus on this?
It's not for me to say, but the evidence shows that parties were largely paying lip sympathy. And the major parties, they understood the problems of this model of reservation with rotation.
Oh, okay.
It actually completely distorts representation and electoral politics and democracy in leadership development. Everybody understands that. But they don't want to say that. So they actually want to scuttle it. They threw the blame on some of the parties which are vocally opposing it. Now, how was the opposition manifested? Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav, Mr. Lalu Yadav and others, they were made the scapegoats. And they were arguing that, look, what about BC women reservation?
Right.
If you reserve for women but not allocate for BCs, then BCs will be relegated in those constituencies. Now, there's a simple answer in the model that I'm proposing.
Right.
Once the party has the choice of nominating where, the party also has a choice of nominating who, because it's not an accident of a reservation of a seat. Within a pool of seats, you can decide, depending on the leadership available, depending on your own electorate, the social coalition that your party appeals to, you can pick up from that segment. So it's natural, organic leadership overcomes all the genuine concerns earlier. But basically, the major parties, they pretended as if they were in favor. I dare say, I don't mean any offense. And they let some people take the blame. And two, I think there was not enough innovation in thinking through the consequences of a certain model. In India, many things happen in a hurry. We sit quiet for years and decades. Suddenly, in a flurry of activity, in a day or two, we want to do something very dramatic and big. And oftentimes, if you don't think through it carefully and build a consensus, you might even commit mistakes. It's not a wise way of doing some things which have long-term implications. You must think through it very carefully. This model we prepared in 1998.
Right.
Then later, the then Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Mr. From Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Balayogi, he personally carried 1,000 copies of this draft bill and the background note that we prepared, all this in updated version,
Yes.
to Delhi, circulated to all members of parliament, discussed with the Prime Minister and the opposition leaders, and that's how, during Vajpayee's government, that bill proposing for reservation of seats with rotation was given up because parties realized it's not a very wise thing. And the then Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. M.S. Gill, endorsed it publicly.
Right.
Then ranking leader in BJP, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, she publicly endorsed. Several other leaders endorsed it. But parties have a very rigid approach. They don't really think through the consequences and they don't respond to evidence and logic. They simply go by the momentum. And I think by default, we were not thinking of a better model which actually serves the purpose and ennobles politics, enriches politics, and enables political leadership development. The other possibility is many major parties are individual-centric. They're almost private estates of individuals. So perhaps there is no deep commitment for leadership development. They prefer somebody being anointed by them as a candidate and acquiring a position on account of their patronage rather than the public's goodwill and her own strength locally. So there was no deep commitment on the part of, I'm not saying all parties, but many parties. They don't care who is the candidate. You can see during election time how the seats are distributed. The flurry of activity and people suddenly jump from this party to that party. Neither the intending candidates, the aspirants have loyalty, nor the party leadership has really serious concern about the credibility of the candidate they're putting up. So I think a large number of factors are there, and now is an opportunity. Instead of doing it in a manner that is actually undermining our democracy and weakening it further, and in a perfunctory way without really empowering women, we can actually strengthen our democracy, enable leadership development, and empower women legitimately on a long-term basis as leaders.
Right. So to seek your final verdict, let's assume that the bill in its current form is presented again. How much of a damage do you think it will be doing for the long term?
Politics will become a lottery. Politics and leadership are very serious things. You cannot create an Abraham Lincoln out of thin air.
Right.
There are potential leaders in every social group, in every gender. The art of politics is nurturing the best leadership, not anybody. See, in India, we have a very peculiar situation. If somebody is offered let's say, a seat by a major party for the Assembly or Lok Sabha, even if somebody has absolutely no background or qualifications to be an effective legislator, rarely do we say no, because it's seen as almost like a property. Power is seen as a personal prerogative.
Right.
It is seen as property. It's a personal attribute. We are used to what they call individual despotism.
Right.
In the name of political power. We think that's normal. No. Politics is about identifying, encouraging, nurturing, and developing the best citizens who have the sense of what is public good and passion for it. Nurturing them and elevating them is the art of politics. In fact, that is the primary function of politics in practical sense. The political party's role is political recruitment.
Right.
Right now, what is recruitment? Caste, money, loyalty, and pedigree, son or daughter of a major politician. Frankly, in most cases, these are the four considerations. Not competence, not public good, not track record, not service. Accidentally, they may be there. The second role of politics is, after political recruitment, allowing the rise of the best through ethical and rational means. Not by mobilizing caste or region or religion and primordial loyalties or hatred or violence, but by actually promoting public good, by inspiring people, by uniting people. So these are extraordinary leadership qualities. They can't be picked up from the society at random. It can't be a lottery. It has to be careful nurturing. See all over the world how political parties actually reach out to active citizens of credibility and encourage them to join their parties. I know in a number of non-resident Indians in the US and elsewhere, they keep asking me, so-and-so party asked us, do you think it's worthwhile to be associated with them? and things of that kind. Because parties actually cast the net wide and encourage the best people to join their parties and embrace their ideology or their agenda or whatever. Whereas in India, it is paying obeisance to the leader, or being the accident of being born in the right womb or the right caste, or having tons of moolah, honestly made or illegitimately made. And of course, oftentimes crime has also become a qualification.
Right.
So you have to change the nature of political recruitment.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, sir. We'll be dissecting this issue further. Do follow our channels.